I say that there's one shortcut that I will be willing to acknowledge, and that is having a great mentor. So if you have somebody who is an expert in the field, or you respect and has already put in the 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 hours, that person can steer you.
When Michael Faraday was growing up, he wasn't interested in the jobs that were available to him. He wasn't interested in something like becoming a blacksmith.
You can spiritually die from engaging most of your working hours, your mental energy, in something that you don't love.
He was much more interested in books. So when the opportunity came along for him to be an apprentice to a bookbinder, he said yes.
That's what I'm talking about, like when you're a kid, in a very visceral way, something strikes you.
And he was right there in the bookbinder shop every day, and he was devouring all the books that came his way, all the things that were exposed to him that he wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else, things that he couldn't even find in a library were available in this shop. And while he was there, he came across one book in particular.
I maintain it's better to read one juicy book that grabs you, that really engages you, that really makes you think, than to read 10, kind of trivial books that don't have it.
One called Improvement of the Mind that became a handbook for Faraday. It taught him a system of learning, a system of taking things around him and learning from them and learning from experiences.
So you're engaging with the material. You're not as you said, you're not a passive reader. You're arguing with it. You're thinking.
And so he would read this book over and over again, and then he would go to science lectures. He loved science lectures. And in the spirit of this book, Improvement of the Mind, he would go and he would take the information from these lectures, take copious notes, and then go and rework his notes until he had something very smooth. And then eventually, after enough study of a topic, he would have a whole chapter of notes. And then eventually he was building his own encyclopedia of all the science that was coming across his way.
I found working on books, the kind of books I write, was actually the perfect thing for me. If I never found the kind of book like the 48 Laws of Power, I might not have amounted to much, because I am a little bit scattered by nature, and having to write a book made me focus.
People saw his notes. He would show them to scientists, and then a great opportunity came. Humphrey Davy, who was the premier scientist of his time, had an opportunity. He was looking for an assistant to help him keep track of all of his notes. Faraday came highly recommended because people had seen these notes that he'd been doing. He'd been building a skill. And this is something that's so important about finding mentors. People think that I'm just going to find the right mentor. I'm going to ask them. They're going to take me on out of some sort of goodness of their heart. You need to bring value to the mentor. In this case, Faraday brought a unique value. He had this incredible skill for taking notes and organizing information. So he brought that to Humphrey Davy. And Humphrey Davy was glad to take him on and put him through lots of work. But for Faraday, all of this work was a great opportunity.
It's a great study that pretty much demonstrated that after 10,000 hours of repetition in practicing a particular skill set, something literally happens to the human brain. A transformation occurs.
He was stunned at how quickly he could learn by actually doing these experiments alongside Davy, by watching how he did it, by learning how Davy's mind worked, by seeing experiments where Davy would even do things like ruling out all of the possibilities and only leaving his theory as the possible thing that could be left. This is called negative capability, and it's an amazing power.
Our tendency in practice, in practicing a skill, is to over-practice what we're already good at.
Yeah. And to be exposed to someone like Humphrey Davy gave Faraday that skill. That was how he learned it. He absorbed it from his mentor.
They can say, look, Brendan, you're pretty good at this skill, but you have this weakness. Start working more on that.
When the time came for Faraday to actually conduct his own experiments, he was ready. He had been building up this skill and building up the skill over so much time that someone came to him and they asked him to do a review of the topic of electromagnetism. And as Davy was doing this review and poring over the notes and going through the ideas, he came up with experiments in his mind that would actually prove ideas about electromagnetism. So he put these into practice. He was actively doing the science. He was actively running these experiments.
But if you're only following what other people are doing, you're in trouble.
And he did an experiment that became the basis for what we now know as electric motors, using electromagnetism to generate movement. This was what he was doing. This was the skill that he had built over these years of being under his mentor.
A mentor will tell you, will look at you and say, you're weak here, practice that. They'll also say, avoid this, don't waste time here. They could cut that 10,000 hours down to 9,000 maybe if they're really good, they're really smart. Or instead of wasting your time and you having to go to 12,000 hours, they'll bring it down closer to that target level.
It took all of this practice. It took doing all of the grunt work for the mentor when the mentor might get the credit. And it took building those skills and observing the mentor carefully and absorbing things from the mentor over years and years for Michael Faraday to become a great scientist. It took all of that for Michael Faraday to become a master. Now you can become a master too, and Michael Faraday sets an incredible example. If you look at it, he didn't start out with just the perfect mentor. It took time, and this may be how it is for a lot of us. Mentors are not scalable. It's this one-to-one thing, but there are plenty of heroes, there are plenty of books out there that you can look at instead.
So reading a book is like bringing something dead to life. It's like taking Frankenstein and imbuing it with life.
First, Faraday went to apprentice under the Bookbinder, not the perfect mentor for him, not the person who he was going to eventually emulate, but at the time, just the right person. He was exposed to the work of this Bookbinder, and in that process, he learned so much about the books that he was around, and then that book, The Improvement of the Mind, became his mentor. He was learning from that book. It became the mentor, and he could take skills and absorb things from that book, and by working with it and going through it again and again. And then he was going to lectures. This could be for you listening to someone's podcast, but he was going to these lectures again and again, and he was taking notes over the lectures, and he was learning from those and then organizing them into his own chapters and into his own encyclopedia of science. And then the right mentor came along.
If you have somebody who is an expert in the field, or you respect and has already put in the 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 hours, that person can steer you.
And he didn't just show up and ask for something. He showed up and he brought skills to the table. He brought to Humphrey Davy his ability to make amazing sense of information. And then he did the grunt work under Humphrey Davy. He was running the experiments. He was learning. He was following him around. He was doing all that. And you can do that too. So it's scalable if you're looking at things like someone's books, someone's podcasts, someone's videos. Doing that kind of thing can be your way to first learn from a mentor at a distance, and then also to build yourself up.
He had developed 5 skill sets, literally, that were so solid that it would come together at some point.
And then eventually finding that right mentor to learn from up close. And that is how you become a master.